In this edition of In the Trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics. We're in the outstanding First Star Logistics studios, and we're talking keys and matchups to this playoff game against the Las Vegas Raiders. The Bengals played the Raiders earlier in the season, and the Bengals handled the Raiders in the fourth quarter in particular in that football game. It was a 16-13 football game with about 10 minutes to go, and the Bengals pulled away. Some things that thought about after that football game that the Bengals are going to have to take into consideration for this playoff game. The defensive coordinator for the Raiders, Gus Bradley, he was with the Seattle Seahawks, and he's always been known for high energy, enthusiastic, effort defensive football teams, and this Raider defense is no exception to that rule. They don't blitz much. In the first matchup, they only blitzed Joe Burrow 2 times the entire football game. They only blitz 12.1% of the time on the season. That's the lowest in the National Football League. There's not another team in the NFL under 14%. Their front four puts pressure on the quarterback 44% of the time. They win on a pass rush rate, 44% of the time. That's top 7 in the National Football League. They also get the quarterback on the ground 11.2% of the time. They're getting the quarterback on the ground, hit, not just hit, on the ground. That's third most in the National Football League without blitzing. They're just relying on that front four, and it's a phenomenal front four. Crosby leads the National Football League in pressures and quarterback hits. He's got 8 sacks to boot. Ngakoue, his running mate at the other defensive end position, has got 10 quarterback sacks. So they can really pressure the quarterback. The thing that they do is rush 4, drop 7. Bradley is going to want to play coverage, and he did that in the first matchup that the Cincinnati Bengals played against the Raiders. Joe Burrow is going to have to be extremely patient. He can't force anything down the football field when they rush 4 and drop 7 into coverage. He was 20 for 29 for 148 yards, touchdown, no interceptions. Quarterback rating, very respectable, 92.3. But, man, you're talking about little over 3 yards per attempt, little over 5 yards per completion. Joe, number 1 in the National Football League, averaging well over 8 yards per attempt. I mean, he was more than 5 yards less than that in the first matchup against the Raiders. So what Bradley is going to do is try to take the big play away from the Cincinnati Bengals. And what the Bengals decided they needed to do was run the football. Joe Mixon had 30 carries in that football game. It's the other Joe, the Joe and Joe show. Joe Mixon is going to have to step up in this football game. He had 30 rushes for 123 yards in that first matchup. He had a 20-yard touchdown run. He had 2 touchdowns on the day. In the second half, 19 carries for 97 yards and a touchdown. He had over 50 yards rushing in the fourth quarter when the Bengals put that game away. So if you're going to go light box, 4, 7 into coverage, Bengals are going to have to take advantage of that light box and be able to run the football and make Gus Bradley blink, make him adjust to the Cincinnati Bengals. Who is going to make the adjustment first? Who's going to have to make the adjustment first? What Gus Bradley does, he runs a few things really, really well. He'll tweak them a little bit. There's no doubt about that. But his players are very, very confident in their system, very, very confident in what he wants them to do. And as a result of that, their mind isn't cluttered and they play very, very fast. What he does a good job of is what Paul Brown used to talk about and what the Bengals are going to have to do offensively against this Raiders football team defensively. Tweaks. You know what you are. You know what you're trying to accomplish. You know what your scheme is. You know what your core plays are. It's going to be a matter of window dressing, formations, personnel groupings, things of that nature. And what you're going to have to do is, like the great Paul Brown said, you make different things look the same and the same things look different. So in other words, you may have one time a matchup where a slot receiver is on a slot cornerback, another matchup by personnel and shifting and formations and motion and whatever. It may be a running back against a linebacker in the same spot, in the slot, same throw for the quarterback, but totally different matchup. So you're trying to play a chess game with Gus Bradley, with personnel, with formations, with window dressing, and try to make his defensive players think a little bit and maybe slow them down a step or a half a step. That's going to be a big factor in this football game. we're talking special teams as a big scenario too. Long field, short field. Darren Simmons, he's concerned about it. I mean, that's his biggest concern every football game. The average drive start. It's huge. The hidden yards. Every yard, every first down is massive in this football game. When you get into the playoffs, it becomes more and more of a factor. In the first matchup, the Bengals' average drive start was their 32-yard line. The Raiders was their 29-yard line. There were 10 possessions in that football game. 3-yard benefit to the Bengals. They were plus 30 yards. That's 3 first downs they didn't have to worry about making that the Raiders had to worry about making. And a lot of times you're going to see the disparity in terms of average drive start be 5 yards, 7 yards. Now you're talking 50, 70 yards. You're talking half a football field, 3/4 of a football field. That's important. That's vitally important in a football game like this. The other thing that Gus Bradley does, he runs a lot of cover 3. That's zone coverage. He'll run quarters as well. And when he does mix man in there, he'll mix man in there periodically. He doesn't blitz much. He doesn't run much man coverage. But when you get that opportunity, you have to recognize they're in man coverage and execute. Joe Burrow has to find the guy that is beating his one-on-one coverage. And it's up to the wideouts to beat that one-on-one coverage out there on the edge, on the perimeter. They got to win that matchup and get open. And Joe Burrow will get you the football. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Another big factor in this football game is yak, rack, whatever you want to call it. Yards after catch, run after catch, yards after contact, run after contact. When you catch the football and you have a hole in the zone coverages, you have to maximize it. Run with the football after the catch. It could be a 35-yard play, and the ball might only be in the air for 5 yards instead of 20 yards with a 15-yard run after catch. Might be a 5-yard catch and a 30-yard run. That's going to be a big factor in this football game. Who's going to do the best job of running to the football and gang tackling? Who's going to be able to accumulate yak yardage, yards after catch, yards after contact? The other thing, both of these quarterbacks do a good job of creating and extending plays. Derek Carr here lately has done a really good job of that for the Las Vegas Raiders. And they've gotten a lot of explosive plays out of it. 50-50 balls down the football field, contested catches, interference penalties down the football field. Derek Carr has done a good job of picking up big, cheap plays and cheap yards for his football team. Joe Burrow has done a tremendous job of creating and extending plays all season long. And which quarterback's going to ad-lib the best and make big plays, make explosive plays, and avoid critical mistakes, avoid huge mistakes. Don't force the football down the football field when you're creating, extending. Which quarterback is going to be more disciplined and not try to play hero football? That's the biggest thing in the playoffs in general. Don't try to be a hero. Do your job, and do your job to the best that you possibly can, to the best of your ability. If everybody does that and executes, you're going to win the football game. Don't try to do something that it wasn't designed for you to do. Don't try to harvest somebody else's crop. Don't say, if you're a linebacker, I'm not sure if my defensive line is going to be able to get to that gap well enough, so I'm going to have to help him and cover my gap. That doesn't work. Do your job. Let him do his job. Everybody do their own job. That's going to be a big deal in this football game. Don't play hero ball. If you're a defensive lineman, stay in your rush lane. Don't chase quarterback sacks. Don't distort your rush lane because you want to try to be selfish and get a quarterback sack. It never works out. They always take advantage of the area that you vacated. It's unbelievable how that works out in the National Football League. Another very simple thing when you get to the playoffs is you want to be the guy that applies the pressure. You don't want to be the guy that feels the pressure. There's going to be pressure in these playoff games, particularly as the game winds down and big plays need to be made. You want to be in a position where you're applying the pressure to the other team and make them feel it. You don't want to be in a situation where they're applying the pressure to you and you're in a scenario where you're going to feel the pressure. You want to make the opposition feel conflicted. You want to make them feel uncertain. You want to make them feel unsure. You don't want to be in that situation yourself. You don't want them putting you in a situation where you're unsure, you're uncertain, you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable. And then everybody starts making assignment errors and breaking down a little bit. The biggest thing to remember about the playoffs, my experiences playing in the playoffs, appreciate it, enjoy it, have fun. Let's put it this way. You can't take it for granted. I mean, you have a scenario where Joe Burrow, in his first year, basically, as a starting quarterback for the entire season, is in the playoffs. His teammate, Jamar Chase, is in the playoffs as a rookie. Chris Collinsworth, former teammate, we went to the playoffs in his rookie year. I mean, I'm sure these guys are like, man, this NFL, it's not that bad. It's pretty easy, you know. We're in the playoffs. And in Chris's rookie year, we went all the way to the Super Bowl. Didn't go again, and Chris didn't go again until the final year of his career. A lot of guys don't go to the Super Bowl ever. Merlin Olsen played 15 distinguished seasons for the Los Angeles Rams, made the Pro Bowl 14 out of the 15 seasons, never went to the Super Bowl. Great player, never sniffed the Super Bowl. Takeo Spikes, 15 years in the National Football League. He was an All-American linebacker at Auburn, first-round pick by the Bengals. He played with the Bengals, the Bills, the Eagles, the 49ers, and the Chargers. Never played in a playoff game. 15 years, never played in a playoff game. So right now, you're one of 14 teams that are left of the 32 teams in the National Football League that qualified for the playoffs. Appreciate it. Enjoy it. Don't take it for granted. Go as far as you possibly can. Because look at the Cleveland Browns last year, for example. The Cleveland Browns beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in a playoff game. Expectations are extremely high after the season that the Cleveland Browns had last year. They have a bunch of injuries and don't live up to expectations and don't even qualify for the playoffs this year. They don't have a winning record this year. You just never know. You can't take it for granted. So when you do get there, try to do everything you can to maximize that opportunity. Take it as far as you can because you never know. You may never get back, or you may get back 5 times. You may win 3 Super Bowls. You just don't know. But I just gave you a couple examples of guys, and there's more guys in that category than there are guys that have won multiple Super Bowls. I can tell you that much right now. Turnovers are always a big deal. When you get to the playoffs, it's an even bigger deal. The team that takes care of the football, doesn't put the football in jeopardy, is going to win the football game. And boy, you look at the Raiders. The Raiders are -9 in the turnover category. -9, 27th in the National Football League. They only have 15 takeaways, tied for 3rd fewest in the league. They have 6 interceptions, dead last in the National Football League. They have all those guys, they drop back into coverage, and they only have 6 interceptions. They have a front four that puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and all those guys back into coverage, they only have 6 interceptions. That, to me, is a little bit of a quandary. That makes me scratch my head a little bit. Also, their red zone defense, dead last in the NFL. They give up a touchdown 81.4% of the time defensively, worst in the National Football League. They've got the fewest interceptions, amongst the fewest takeaways total. They're getting killed in the red zone in terms of red zone touchdown percentage, and they won 10 football games. Wow. Makes you wonder. They must be just really big on intangibles. I mean, this football team is tight in some way, shape, or form. They've formed a bond. But the Cincinnati Bengals have to take advantage of that. They have to win the turnover margin. And as we know, when Cincinnati wins the turnover margin, they're tough to beat. This year, they're 6-2 when they win the turnover battle. They're 3-0 when it's even. So they're 9-2 when they don't have negative turnovers. When they do have negative turnovers, they're 1-5. So in the 10 wins, only 5 giveaways. In the 7 losses, 16 giveaways. Got to take care of the football. There are no 2 ways about it. Another form of self-destruction is penalty. In the first matchup was a great example. The Bengals had 1 penalty in that entire game for 5 yards. They had a defensive lineman line up in the neutral zone in the 4th quarter when the game was already decided. The Raiders had 7 penalties for 77 yards, and half of those extended drives for the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals had 3 first downs by penalty that extended drives and ultimately resulted in points. So the Bengals won the first matchup. They had 2 takeaways and only 1 giveaway. They were +1 in the turnover department, and they, from a penalty standpoint, the Raiders gave up 72 yards, 7+ first downs in penalty yards, and extended drives for the Cincinnati Bengals allowed them to score points because of penalties that allowed first downs by penalty. That is another form of self-destruction. So when you're in a playoff game, you cannot be your own worst enemy. You have to take yourself off your schedule. The Raiders are good enough to beat you. You can't help the Raiders beat you. In the first matchup, the Cincinnati Bengals ran 70 snaps. The Raiders ran 47, plus 23 snaps for the Bengals. Time of possession, plus 14 minutes and 40 seconds. They played keep away. They basically took the ball away for a quarter, 15-minute quarters in the NFL. They had a time of possession advantage of 14 minutes and 40 seconds. They basically played one more quarter than the Raiders did. Why? Third down. Third down conversions are going to be massive. You got to minimize 3 and outs. You can't be just 1, 2, 3 and punting the ball back and not giving your defense an opportunity to collect themselves and make potential adjustments. In the first game that they played during the regular season, the Bengals were 8 for 16 on third down, 50%. The Raiders, 1 of 7, 14.3%. They only converted 1 third down in that football game. The Bengals converted 8, and 3 of those were by penalty. So that's big. That's big. That's the self-destruction we were talking about. Third down is going to be massive. Another thing that always determines outcomes of football games, red zone. We talked about the Raiders struggling in the red zone defensively, giving up a league worst over 80% in the red zone. The Cincinnati Bengals in the first game, 2 for 2 in the red zone, got in the red zone twice, punched in for touchdowns. The Raiders, on the other hand, they were in the red zone 3 times against the Bengals and only scored 1 touchdown. The Bengals were 100% in the red zone. The Raiders were 33% in the red zone. In the first quarter, the very first series that the Bengals had the football, Ngakoue got a sack strip, and the Raiders recovered the football, and they advanced to the 9-yard line of the Bengals. 1st and goal at the 9-yard line. What does the defense do with the sudden change? They gain 2 yards in 3 snaps and have to settle for a field goal. So the Bengals did a phenomenal job on sudden change. That turnover, if the Raiders would have punched that in for a touchdown, gotten more momentum, would have been a bigger factor in the football game. The Bengals defense minimized the damage. They were like the fire department, went out there and put out the fire and limited it to just a field goal. All they did was give up 2 yards. The Raiders on 3 snaps after that turnover and made them settle for a field goal. That was a big deal in that football game. Let's talk about some matchups a little bit. I think it's going to come down to, this is in the trenches. This is our podcast video cast that we do for you fans and you folks on a regular basis. This game's going to be decided in the trenches. There's no doubt in my mind. Matchups galore. You got the H-boys, Hendrickson and Hubbard. Hendrickson and Hubbard have combined for 21 sacks. That'll work. 21 sacks. Colton Miller, the left tackle, the Raiders, is their best offensive lineman by far. Pro Bowl caliber player. So is Hendrickson. Hendrickson made the Pro Bowl this year with the Bengals. That matchup, Hendrickson on Colton Miller, is going to be a stirring battle to watch. Brandon Parker at right tackle. Sam Hubbard. I think Sam Hubbard's going to take advantage of that matchup. I think that's going to be a favorable matchup for the Cincinnati Bengals. We already talked about the 2 edge rushers for the Raiders, Crosby and Ngakoue. I mean, those 2 set the edge in the pass rush, just like the H-boys do for the Bengals, and they set a good edge in the running game as well. So I think the defensive end, offensive tackle matchups are going to be huge in this football game. Which group is going to step up? I think the weak spot for the Raiders are their guards. So now, will DJ Reader, Larry Ogunjobi, BJ Hill, will they be able to pressure the quarterback at the interior of the pocket, be able to get in the quarterback's face, push the pocket in his lap? That's going to be huge in this football game. Will the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line be able to handle the interior pass rush of Hankins and Jefferson. Phylon isn't going to be able to play. Solomon Thomas had a sack in the first matchup in the regular season inside a defensive tackle. Which offensive line is going to be able to handle the edge rush and then not allow penetration in the interior of the pocket from the defensive tackles? I think that's going to be a monster matchup in this football game. There's no doubt about it. Like we talked about, running game is going to be huge. Will they be able to get Joe Mixon going in the running game? That's going to be a big, big factor for the Cincinnati Bengals. They're going to have to handle Jacobs as well. If the Raiders can get Jacobs going in the running game and have balance offensively and take some pressure off of Carr, that's going to go a long way to a victory for them if the Bengals can't control that running game. They want to control the running game, control Jacobs, get pressure on Carr, and hit him. He's a different quarterback, just like every quarterback is when he gets hit. Then he'll put the ball up, and he'll make some mistakes. He'll give the Bengals an opportunity to make plays on the football, and he'll do that periodically during the course of the game. When he does, you have to take advantage of it. You can't let the ball slip through your hands and fall to the ground for an incompletion when you could have had an interception. When plays are there to be made, you have to make them and take full advantage of them. We know the Cincinnati Bengals have a big three at the wide receiver position. How will those receivers handle the zone defenses, the cover 3, cover 4, quarters coverage that Gus Bradley is going to implement? They're going to have to run precise routes. They're going to have to be disciplined. They can't get frustrated if Joe Burrow decides that he can't get the football to them. They're just going to have to live for another snap. Joe's not going to force it. He's not going to make mistakes in that regard. And if the ball is up in a 50-50 jump ball situation, if you don't get it, you have to make darn sure the defense doesn't get it. Reverse roles, turn it into a defensive back, strip it from the defensive back if he has a better opportunity to get possession of the football than you do. Can't allow turnovers. Make the 50-50 ball catches, those contested catches. They're going to be big in this football game. So what's going to happen on the perimeter? Will the Bengals wide receivers be able to handle the zone coverages and mixing up of coverages that Gus Bradley is going to implement out there? This is a monster matchup. Let's talk about the tight end position. They have a unicorn, a physical freak, Darren Waller. Darren Waller stands 6'6", weighs 255 pounds, and runs routes like a wideout. He can get in and out of cuts. He's got great acceleration out of cuts. He's got great hands. And in the first game, he controlled the action in the middle of the football field. He was targeted 8 times, had 7 catches for 116 yards. He had the 2 biggest plays in the football game for the Raiders. He had a 31-yard catch and a 25-yard catch. Those were the 2 longest plays of the day. So they're going to try to implement the tight end against the Bengals defense. The Bengals have had some problems covering tight ends. They've had to cover some great ones. Kittle, Andrews, Pro Bowl tight ends. Waller's another Pro Bowl tight end. Will the Bengals be able to figure out a way to take Waller out of the football game or at least control him? In the first matchup, 6 different players at one time or another, including linebackers and defensive backs, all covered Waller or tried to cover Waller. It's going to have to be tighter coverage this time. It was too much real estate. Didn't press and shrink space enough against Waller in that first football game. Even when they bracketed, the bracket wasn't tight enough. When they had a linebacker and safety in coverage on Waller. So they're just going to have to tighten that whole thing up. He's a really good football player. Foster Moreau, the other tight end, had a touchdown catch in the football game as well. So the tight end position was big for the Raiders in the first football game. A very underrated player, in my opinion, in this game, C.J. Uzomah. C.J. Uzomah is having a great year, blocking as well as catching the football. I'd love it if C.J. Uzomah was the best tight end on the field on Saturday night. C.J. Uzomah has all the potential and capability of stepping up and having a very productive football game and putting up good numbers. Love to see C.J. Uzomah have the most productive night of all tight ends in the football game. Drew Sample is another guy that can make contributions in the run game, in the pass game as well. Bengal tight ends, If you can be more of a factor than the Raider tight ends in this game, that would be massive. One guy that's come out of nowhere, basically, for the Raiders offensively is Zay Jones out of East Carolina. Zay Jones, in the first game, he only had 8 catches on the season. 8 catches in the first. That was the 10th game of the year. Since that game to the conclusion of the season, now all of a sudden, Zay Jones has 47 catches. So in a matter of 8 games, 39 receptions in an 8-game stretch, he has become a go-to guy. He wasn't in the equation as much in that first matchup. Zay Jones, number 7, he's got good speed. He can run, and they're utilizing him in their offense right now. Derek Carr is gaining more and more confidence in him. His dad, Robert Jones, played in the NFL for 10 years. You know who his uncle is? Jeff Blake. Zay Jones is going to want to have a big game against the Cincinnati Bengals, a former team of his uncle, Jeff Blake. So that one's going to be an interesting one to watch. Hunter Renfrow, the slot receiver, shifty, savvy slot receiver. They stack him. He'll run option routes, jerk routes all day long on you. They did a good job on him in the first game. He only had 30 yards, I think, on 4 catches. So they did a good job on him. But on the season, Hunter Renfrow has 103 catches for 1,038 yards. He's got 9 touchdowns, tied for 9th most in the National Football League. So the Raiders have weapons as well. And they have a quarterback that has as much arm talent as any quarterback in the National Football League. Talked about Derek Carr's arm talent, and it's extraordinary. They really let him call the offense at the line of scrimmage. I mean, he's excellent at the line of scrimmage. He knows what he's looking at. He gets him out of bad plays into good plays. He's a veteran quarterback. The Bengals are going to have to disguise well. They're going to have to give him one look pre-snap and something totally different post-snap, but they're all going to have to be on the same page. If they make an assignment mistake, Derek Carr is going to take advantage of their blunder. So that chess match is going to be interesting to watch. And you can't overdo that, but you're going to have to – you can't just line up and show Derek Carr exactly what you're going to do pre-snap when he's at the line of scrimmage, basically just calling the offense. They give him very, very tremendous amount of freedom in which to operate there. So that's going to be a big factor in the football game as well. When the Bengals do get off to a good start, it's a huge factor in the football game. When they score first, they're 6-1. When they have a halftime lead, they're 8-1. A fast start is going to be big in this football game. You look at both of these football teams have the exact same record, 10-7. The Cincinnati Bengals have outscored the opposition by 84 points. The Las Vegas Raiders have been outscored by 65 points. To get to the playoffs with the 4th worst mark in NFL history, being outscored by 65 points, that's the 4th worst amount to be outscored by and get to the playoffs in NFL history. So that's the number that's puzzling. 6 interceptions, like I said, is a number that's puzzling. Giving up over 81%, 81.4% in the red zone defensively, dead last in the league, is puzzling. How is this football team 10-7? And think of all the adversity that they went through. I mean, the deal with Ruggs going over 120 miles an hour. He kills a woman. You know, you're talking death. He's suspended, a very popular guy. He's kicked off the football team, and rightfully so. I mean, they had a cornerback on social media threatening people with weapons he was let go. This football team has been through, you talk about adversity. This football team's been through all kinds of adversity. So playing in a football game is it's like recess. I mean, that's not a pressure-packed, adversity-filled situation for them compared to what they went through as a football team off the football field. And I think that's a factor. I think that made them bond. I think they've gotten closer. I think they really have a strong feeling for each other. Coaching staff to coaches to coaches, coaches to players, players to players, players to coaches. It's a very, very strong bond. John Gruden, you know, he's basically blown up during the course of the season with all the email controversy that he had with the commissioner in the National Football League. I mean, Rich Bisaccia is he's going to be a candidate for coach of the year. The way he held this group together and glued them together. I mean, it's an amazing thing what the Las Vegas Raiders did. They were 6-7, had to win 4 football games just to get in the playoffs. If they lost any of them, they were out. They won all 4 of them. The Las Vegas Raiders have had 4 overtime games, won every single one of them. They know how to finish. They know how to finish close football games. The most important game of the 4 to get into the playoffs, and it ended up being an overtime game, was the 35-32 victory over the Chargers. It was on Sunday Night Football. What a game that was. I mean, the Raiders got in by the skin of their teeth, but they're riding some serious momentum. It's going to be interesting to see if it carries over. The other thing, you look at this. They played 5 quarters of football. 5, not just 4. 5 against a division rival. Very emotional football game. A lot of emotion, a lot of energy, a lot of it was physical. That's a fatigue. There's no doubt about that. They have a short week. Play on Saturday at 4:30. Bengals have a short week as well, but they played Sunday afternoon, not Sunday night. They don't have to travel. Raiders have to come east. They have to come a couple of time zones. They come from the west time zone to the eastern time zone. That's a big adjustment. Not sleeping in your own bed. You're traveling and all those sorts of things. So a lot of things seem to be aligned in the Bengals' direction potentially, but momentum is such a huge thing. The Bengals had serious momentum after the Kansas City Chiefs game. They decided to rest players, and I think it's a good decision, but the momentum is a little bit curbed because, they earned their bye, and they took a bye basically and didn't play. They rested as many starters as they could against the Kansas City Chiefs, against the Cleveland Browns after clinching against the Kansas City Chiefs. And now they're getting ready to play the Raiders. The Raiders have that momentum that could carry over. It's going to be interesting to see the intangibles of that aspect of this football game, this matchup as well. The one thing in watching tape of this Raiders football team, their receivers run more double moves than anybody in the National Football League. By that, I mean, instead of just an out route, it's out and up. It's hook. Instead of just hooking, it's hook, pump fake, go. Double moves, 2 moves. The Bengals are going to have to really be on their toes. Double moves are a very, very difficult thing to defend. If you bite on that first move, you can find yourself in a whole heap of trouble. It takes time, though, to run those routes. So the pass rush has to get there. It's like the glove fit in the hand. It all goes together. If the Bengals get a really solid pass rush, won't be able to execute those double moves very effectively. They'll be meaningless. If the Bengals don't get a good pass rush, those double moves become a big, big pain in the neck. I can tell you that right now. This becomes a numbers game for the Cincinnati Bengals offense working against the Las Vegas Raiders defensive unit. Like I said, they don't blitz much. They blitz the least of any defense in the National Football League. They rely on their front 4 to create pressure. So they try to play coverage, and they have 7 players that they can use in that category of coverage. There are 5 offensive linemen. There's a quarterback. The most the Bengals can put out in a route is 5. If the Bengals are having problems blocking those defensive linemen and they have to utilize a tight end, you only have 4 receivers out in a route covered by 7 people. If they're having trouble on both ends, they have to use a tight end on the right side and chip with the back on the left side. You're down to 3 receivers out in a route with 7 people in coverage. You can double team everybody. Point being, the Bengals offensive line is going to have to step up and be able to handle one-on-one pass rush and not have to rely on a tight end or a back to constantly double or chip to help them, because that's taking people out of the pass, out of the design of the play. That's taking them out of the route tree. And the Raiders at that point have you severely outnumbered. Watch for that. It's going to be a numbers game. It's going to be a little bit of a chess match. Back and forth we go in that regard. So I think there's multiple ways, though, to handle a good pass rush without helping with You can chip with the back. You can help with the tight end. That's 2 ways to do it. You can also quick tempo the ball, get the ball out of the quarterback's hand quickly. That's another way to handle it. And run draws and screens. If they are just teeing off like Crosby and Ngakoue are going to do, slow them down with a good draw, old-fashioned draw. Run the screen, drop the screen pass behind them as they're blowing up the football field, and all these guys are dropping into coverage. Paul Brown invented the draw. I remember vividly when he was the head coach of the football team the first couple of years I was with the Bengals. He'd be walking up and down the sideline. He'd walk up to the offensive coordinator and go, "Time to run the draw. We're going to get him. We're going to hit him right in the butt with this draw play." And he was right, because they were teeing off on the pass rush, and the draw would go big. Toss the screen in there, put the screen in there, screen behind them. That slows the pass rush down. So there are things that the Bengals can do in order to take advantage of, use that strength against the Raiders. That's a big factor in this football game. We talked about penalties at one point and the self-destruction of penalties. How about this? The Bengals have been penalized 72 times, second fewest in the NFL for 620 yards, fewest in the NFL. The Raiders, 124 penalties, 31st out of 32 teams, 1,104 yards, dead last in the National Football League. The Raiders were penalized 52 more times than the Bengals for 484 yards on the season, almost 5 football fields. That's what I'm talking about. That's part of hidden yards. That's part of self-destruction. The Bengals are going to have to continue that trend they had set all year long about being very, very smart and intelligent in avoiding penalties. No pre-snap penalties, no false starts, no defensive linemen lining up off sides, things of that nature. And then good hand placement. No hands outside the framework of the body where you can call for holding. No defensive back jamming a wide receiver and getting up in his face and going to get penalized for illegal use of hands or holding penalties or whatever defensively. Pass interference. Eliminate all those things. That's what I'm talking about. There's a big disparity between what the Raiders did all season long and what the Bengals did all season long in terms of incurring penalties. And finally, enjoy the process. You're one of 14 teams that qualify for the playoffs. The 2 number 1 seeds get a bye. So there are 12 teams playing this weekend. 6 are going to be eliminated. So now you're down to the Elite 8. You survive that, you're down to the Final 4. You survive that, you're in the Super Bowl. My whole thing has always been try to climb the ladder of success. You're setting different goals. Okay, so let's take a rookie. The rookie's first goal was to make the football team. Okay, he makes the team. His second goal is to be on a winning football team. When the Bengals guaranteed themselves a winning record, that was another goal accomplished. Third goal might have been to win 10 football games, double digits. They won that 10th game against the Kansas City Chiefs. That also won them a spot in the playoffs and won them the division title. So that game against the Chiefs, 3 goals were accomplished. Now your next goal is to win a playoff game and then continue to advancement like we talked about, making it all the way to the Super Bowl. So now the ladder of success, you're climbing one rung at a time. You made the team. Then you made the starting lineup. Then you had a winning season. Then you won 10 football games. And while winning 10 football games, you made the playoffs. You won the division. Now you're trying to win a playoff game. Pretty soon you're climbing that ladder of success and you're separating from the ground. And you're starting to feel pretty good about some of your accomplishments. That's what this football team is doing on an individual and collective basis right now. And there's nothing like it. I'm telling you, the satisfaction that you feel after a playoff win, and if you can win the AFC Championship, I'll never forget the feeling of elation in that locker room amongst grown men when we beat the then San Diego Chargers in the Freezer Bowl. Unbelievable. You can't duplicate that kind of feeling. I hope this football team enjoys a playoff win, an AFC Championship, and how about a Super Bowl win? That dog would hunt all day, every day.
At First Star Logistics, we're a very strict company that really puts the pressure on our employees. Brakes? What are those?
That's what I'm talking about, Icky. Get the body right, then the mind's right.
You know, gotta get that body right.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Become a star with a chance to earn the highest commission percentages in the industry as a freight broker agent. Check out firststarlogistics.com.